Welcome back to World's Strongest Opinions. This is episode 63 with CJ Krause is joining us again. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, and when I say us, it's actually just me today. This is a fun little episode of trying something different and everything because you have a ton of stuff going on, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've been really busy these past few months with everything
Yeah,
going on. So yeah, I guess we're gonna talk about it now. So
yeah, because I was like, that it sounded like a good time. I was like, it's always good because, yeah, I figure last time I saw you would have been OSG. And of
Mhm.
course, I mean, we talk regularly, but I know you had teased some plans kind of back then
Yep,
and
that's where the
everything. Like,
whole thing was starting to kind of manifest itself and starting to build into it. And then I had some life changes happen, which gave me an opportunity to really hone in and focus on it and build what I want it to be ready for launch, which is going to be this week. So I'm pretty excited.
that's awesome. So, what all do you have going on?
So I've been, as a lot of you know, or don't know, maybe you don't. We'll find out. I am a nutrition coach. I went to school for nutrition. I'm a certified sports nutritionist. I've been working with a lot of athletes on their diet for prep, and I've had a lot of athletes for their focus for their cuts, especially two on water cuts. I'm going to be launching a full website and business called GSK Nutrition, and opening up to 30 to 40, depending on what people are looking for, athletes to jump on. So good amount of availability for anyone trying to hone in their abilities, maximize their potential with their food, or just get ready for shows and water cut and refeed. Keyword refeeding as well and performing after you make the weight.
Yeah, that makes sense because I know you had helped our fellow WSO athlete Tyler Davis with his nutrition leading up to OSG
Yeah,
and
I did
everything.
worked with Tyler. Tyler came up to me and asked me how he can make weight. I know he was having struggles staying in the weight class almost in the 90s.
Hmm.
He's a big guy. He's strong. He's very. But
Yeah,
I just manipulated his nutrients properly, and he had the easiest cut he's ever had. Took second at OSG, which you can't complain about that one. So his performance didn't go down, and he's still maintaining a lot of stuff that we worked on to this day at his leanest body weight. So his cuts are getting easier, and he's getting stronger off the background that we developed on a 12-week prep.
yeah, that's awesome because I know he just recently tagged us. We did a collaborative of like his 5 year progress thing and seeing how lean he still is and everything. I was like,
Yeah, I was
that makes sense.
very honored that he reached out to me, especially because we've had a little rivalry over the past few years. It's all fun, but it's that respect you earn and showing what I can bring to the table as someone at his level. At the time was World Strongman U90, took second at OSG this past year. Like one of the best 90s in the class is I'm working with, and was able to have his best cut he's ever had and still perform, and now able to stay in the weight class and get stronger. So it's a double-edged sword for me because I get to compete against them more, which I'm really excited to. Like, it's my lifelong summer too, but I love the challenge as an athlete too.
That makes sense. Wait, so when's your next competition? What all do you have lined up for that?
Oh, my next one for like fun is a local one here, Shamrock Showdown, March 16th. It is gonna have a max deadlift, so I'm hoping to pull over 800 again. That's gonna be
Nice.
fun. That's an under 220 show. So if I'm feeling good, I'll cut down to 90s and try to break the American record, which is 825. But I've been dealing with some erector issues in my back, so I might just stick with 800, play it safe on that one. But after that, USS Nationals is kind of a there. I'm gonna get another 220 show. I don't weigh more than 210 anytime, so it's not like it's hard for me to be a 220 athlete. But the big focus is chaos.
Yeah.
Heading back over to England and trying to do better than last year and finish the job that I was trying to do, not fall off the podium this time.
Yeah. I was like, that's such a tight show and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
So
So that'll be exciting. And I saw that you're doing commentary for Chaos Live is launching.
yes, I'm very excited for that too. There's Chaos is doing besides the U90 show, they're doing the U64 women's show. So the professional show. I was chosen to do the commentary work for that U64 show. I don't know my co-commentators yet, but I want to be the lead for that. So I'm really excited because as you probably, hopefully, you heard my voice. I got recognized actually recently at a show I did in Illinois. They knew my voice before they knew me, because
Nice.
from Pro Strongman League. So I've done a bunch
Yeah.
of their commentary work. So I'll be doing Chaos Live this year as their lead commentator for the U64 show. So I'm excited to, branch out more into that too. And I love, doing all that, bringing the talk to the athletes and highlighting them.
Yeah, because I think that makes a huge difference of just, like, having that good commentary and, like, that interaction of, like, that's what, like, pushes the sport forward. It's,
Mhm.
like, quality live streams, one, but also, like, an engaging live stream. Because so many live streams for the longest time used to be, like, long intermissions, not very much commentary or, like, loud music that you
Or
can't
just like
hear
a picture of
anything.
the athlete lifting the weight, which is like good, if you know what you're
Yeah.
looking for. But I feel like adding some kind of educated mindset to it and kind of breaking down what's going on, and like you don't watch football without someone talking on the screen, explaining the plays. Even though we could watch it on mute, it's still fine. But like, we like listening to the commentary, listen to what they say, whether you agree or disagree. Whether it's critiquing, whether it's critical, whatever it is, it's or highlighting and things like that. It's very important to legitimize the sport, and I'm really honored to be able to bring that and be able to do that for many shows I've been doing and continue to do it. And so apparently, I'm doing pretty good at it. So.
Yeah, which is nice. I think it's like trying to have like a well-rounded portfolio and stuff because I think it's one of those things that we've talked about it before of like trying to help build up the sport, but also build up like what you have to offer and
Yeah.
everything because it's
Oh,
like, yeah.
well, I mean, like, I'm fortunate. Like, this is a big thing. I did not compete at OSU this past year. I felt like just my body was tired, and it just
Mhm.
something I just didn't. I wasn't having fun. So I need to like let my body heal. I need to bring the fun back. And I was a nutrition coach for 5 athletes at OSG. I had
Mhm.
5 athletes. I was just like doing everything where I making sure they made weights. Like literally the day before weigh-ins, I was at the host hotel going up and down 4 different um, levels to different athletes, just checking in on them, making sure they're good, and leaving, go to the next ones. I was the most stressed out person the day before weigh-ins, but it really brought something to me that there's whenever an athlete finishes their career, they think what's next, and I know what's next to me. It's either going to be or both working with athletes on nutrition, doing commentary, and growing the sport for the next generation. And I love that that's there for me. I have a lot to accomplish as an athlete still, and I want to, and I
Mhm.
will. But it's good to see like there's something with my favorite thing, which is strongman. I can be doing
Yeah.
this.
No, I think that makes a huge difference. I know we saw each other, I think, 2 times at OSG, and you're so busy and had stuff on your plate that I was
Oh man,
like,
I was like
yeah.
running to Tyler, I was running to Guitar, I was running to Grace, I was checking on Crystal, I was going to Colleen, I was checking on all of them, making sure that are you eating this? Are you doing this? Don't eat this now, dude. Like this is something again that I want to bring to the sport is like change the mindset. I'm like every one of these athletes have coaches, right? They teach them how to train, how to lift, how to get their mindset in. A lot of
Mhm.
them are missing that piece of like, what do you need to eat during a show? What do you need to be eating before a show? Like, how do you refeed? What's your sodium levels? How much water should I be having? And each athlete's different. And I have to work with them. It takes time to like learn the athlete. Once I learn them, then I can dial them in and figure out what they need to be snacking, what they need to eat. And I love doing that. It is actually like as stressful as it was so much fun on my end too.
Yeah, because I think that's the interesting part of, like, we just had him on the show, but, like, Andrew Clayton was talking about that feeling of, like, being able to be in a support role of, like, trying to bring other people success, like, finding that also that level of fulfillment and saying, like, being able to say, "Here's how I got to where I am," like, "How can I help you to get to that point?" And being
Or
able to
just seeing
see
someone's
yeah.
potential and like you're missing X. I see everything. It's like when I work with a client, I don't reinvent their diet. They're athletes. They
Mhm.
know how to eat food.
Yeah.
Like I'm not being like, you need to throw this away. You need to eat this. Like, no, you just need to look at what they're doing, look at how
Mhm.
they're performing, and look at the missing pieces. And each athlete's completely different, and it's a different puzzle. And I think like so like I don't give athletes what I do. It doesn't work like at
Mhm.
all. You need to see what they're doing, what they respond to. Like it's just so different. And the fact that like I can see that through my experiences and through what I've done as a career that to my favorite thing, which is strongman. So I'm really excited to do that. So again, I'm really excited to be on the show and be able to talk about this before I launch.
Yeah, because I think that's super important, and I think, like, having you have the strong academic background, but you also have performance to back that up,
Yeah.
and I think, like you were saying, the most important thing is, like, having it tailored to them, because I think so many people kind of, like they'll like have a coach, like a good coach tailors everything to you, but like having a solid meal plan of seeing like what can we do to maximize the potential here, like
Mhm.
is super helpful because it is one of those things. Like you were saying, almost everyone understands at this point. If you wanted to, you could do MyFitnessPal, keep track of your macros and stuff that way. Or kind of like people have a general view, but don't always have like the whole picture. So it's like this extra, like I think for many athletes or people, the nutrition part can just be kind of like either stressful or it's super monotonous because you're just like eating steamed chicken and broccoli all the time or whatever it is that's your like go to do this every day
Yeah,
kind
and
of thing.
there's so much more to that than the nutrition. Like the amount of athletes that I work with on cuts that like I'm working with on currently right now from the Arnold on Andrew Pepiot. Like he's gonna do amazing at the Arnold. He's within like 4 kilos before the middle of a water load, well, a sodium one. Like athletes don't understand a lot of the time. He's done this like a few times. He's like, this is a little different than what I've always done. And I'm like, well, here's why I'm doing it. I broke it
Mhm.
down for him, like explained every step of the way. It wasn't like, oh, trust me. He's like, wow, this is the first time that I felt like I know what's going on versus like I'm hoping it's going to work. You know, we're
Yeah.
expecting this, and this to happen. And if this happens, we do this. If this doesn't happen, we do this. Because honestly, the first time I work with an athlete, it's educated guessing to an extent based on regular data. And then once I've
Mhm.
done an athlete's cut 2, 3 times, I've got it dialed in that like I know exactly when they're going to drop. I know like I can literally predict it to a T. Like if you ask one of my athletes, like Katara Taylor or Grace, you can talk to them. I'm like, you're going to be this, this, and this, and it's literally 99% accurate. I know exactly what their body's going to do.
Yeah. And I think that is like super important of trying to like get that piece settled in and stuff. And I think that makes a big difference because I think not everyone has Darren's wonderful ability to just not care about water cuts, says
Yeah,
they're easy. But I think for a lot of people, cuts really are this kind of like mysterious, stressful process.
yeah.
Like it's either you follow directions from someone who gave you like, you know, kind of why it works, but you don't know the science or like the ins and outs of exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, and then
Which,
well, again, each athlete's a little different. Like I can't give someone
mhm.
an athlete myself. I know myself, right? I know exactly how I work.
Yeah.
I load salt, I load carb, and I load water early, and then I cut the salt first, the carb second, and then I coast to the end on that. The second I cut sodium, because my body absorbs sodium so well, I lose like 3 kilos
Hmm.
every time. You know how many people do that? Not many.
Yeah.
Like I know it's like okay, the second I pull sodium after loading for a couple days, I'm gonna be 3 kilos lighter the next morning, and
Nice.
and it's like clockwork. I've never since I've learned that about myself, I've never had that not happen.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just like I don't know someone else is gonna be that way. Some people are carb sensitive, some people are sodium sensitive, some people bloat a lot when we give them a bunch of water. Some people don't bloat at all. Some people lose it all at once. Some people
Hmm.
lose it 2 pounds a day. But like it's once you have the data, you know how to predict it. You can maximize by having them come in at the right weight for them for the cut and then pulling out at the right time so they're depleted for the least amount of time. And then you know how to refeed them, get them back to their training weight. And that's how you
Hmm.
get the most out of an athlete. Like we train so hard and then we just bash our body to the ground on a cut. And then we're like, oh, I didn't perform well. And I'm like, what, there's like a piece there that you didn't get.
Hmm.
And like it breaks my heart to see like athletes work so hard and then a cut takes away too much energy or they over sweat or things like that.
Hmm.
That hopefully, like I said, I want to bring this to the sport. I think it's a piece we're missing is that educated process of like how to make weight and bounce back and compete. So
Yeah, because that makes sense. Because otherwise, you have that kind of like either miserable process of like fasting and or abusing uh sweat sticks, like some people have, like just thinking, and it's one of those things that like you think you can have the best prep in the world, but if you start like the stress of a water cut and the fasting and everything makes it so you don't sleep the night before and
yeah,
like you're just in an awful state, like that can make a huge difference because you
you lose
think,
5 to 10%
yeah,
of your strength that day, and that's a rep, that's a couple reps, that's a max.
yeah,
And the level we compete at, or a lot of us want to get to. If you're not at that level, that's
mhm,
okay too. But you want to get to that level. How do you expect to do that when you're 5 to 10% weaker day of show? Like
yeah.
you can't make those mistakes at the top. So
That's true. And you want it to like we've talked about before of like like once again, Andrew Clayton was talking about like how you want to dial in every single part of the process of like make it easier because also what people don't oftentimes forget is like what is it financial stress can affect your performance but also that like nutritional part of like if you're stressing so much about this and everything like and it's kind of like guesswork. You imagine a lot of people they show up to weigh-ins, sleep deprived. A lot of times have been fasting for 24 hours or whatever it is, and like agitated, stressed out, and like that can impact you because also you think for some of these people you want to have a good, effective refeed, but also make sure that you're not going in performing like you said 5 to 10% below
Well,
capacity, but
the
also
refeed is
injuries.
almost more important than the cut, like, being
Yeah.
honest. Like, that's just like I call okay, so here's how I explain a lot of things. I call, dieting down, that's cooking, right?
Hmm.
You can cook, you can make a mistake, you can add more salt, you can recreate, you can do a lot of things along the way while you're cooking something, right?
Yeah.
The cut and the refeed is baking. It is tailored to a T. You follow every single piece of that, or it's not going to rise, or it's not going to do the thing you want it to do. You can make
Hmm.
slight adjustments to kind of like make it work sometimes. Like I've had to like because the athlete didn't listen or didn't follow it 100% to this and that. You can do it, but like if you want to have that like let's say perfect cupcake, you got to follow the recipe to the T across the board, and you can't divvy from it.
Yeah.
And that goes with like the cut itself, the get to the scale, the refeed, the knowing like what did we do to get there. I can go into so much depth. Like, did we cut fiber? Did you opt for the laxative choice? That's going to decide when do we add in the liquids, when we start eating solid food. It's all just again, I leave it up to the athlete when it comes to certain things. Like if it's A or B and you prefer A, cool, we're gonna make it work. But here's what you have to do. Here's the steps for when it's done.
Hmm.
And sometimes saving athletes from themselves as well. Understanding if a cut's too severe, understanding they've never done it before, if their body's not going to respond. It's all just a factor of being a coach, like having those tough conversations. And it's just, I think it's an important part of growing the sport to the next level is getting everyone to perform their best. And this is a way to do it and teaching them how to do it. There's so much data on training. There's so many great coaches. And there are great nutrition coaches out there besides
Hmm.
myself as well. And I know a bunch of them, but I think really there's more great coaches for lifting than there is for nutrition. I feel like there's some that don't have the full education on both the making the scale and the refeed principles for all types of athletes. Some are great with open, some are great with like male, some are great with female. But I think just most of my clients are female, and then I have a good amount of males in the U90 up to open weight currently. So I've seen the spectrum. I understand what each body type needs to look like. So I feel like I have a good lock in on that. And plus, I'm always learning. So
Yeah. And I think that's always important because I think what is it? You see different people posting about it, but it's like everyone's different and thinking too, especially once it comes to like gender and stuff. Like women aren't just small men. Like they have so many more things to think about when you
oh my
realize
god,
like
women just are
hormone health and all that stuff. Like
yeah,
there's so much that can change of like,
they're a different ball
yeah.
game. Depending what week of the month it is for them, I can predict how their body's going to adapt. I can adjust their water cuts, whether I know how close they are on their cycle and things like that. I think it's very important to know that about female athletes if you're going to take on, especially for water cuts, because especially if they're going so low on their body fat, you need to understand you can mess with hormonal cycles. You can mess with menstrual cycles if you go too severe, which
Hmm.
I never want to do. I want to teach them how not to. And it's kind of important to understand those lines with these athletes. Is again, saving athletes from themselves is also a big factor of this. I myself
Hmm.
have made too big of cuts. I made a 14% cut to make weight for a show before. You think that I should have been done? No. But I did it and I had a good reason to do it because it was for OSG and I made weight and I did the work for that one. But I also learned that like, man, I should not do that again.
Hmm.
So I went up a weight class. So.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing is trying to like make that call because you think otherwise you'd see of like watching last year watching I mean people have different opinions about him and everything but like Ben Donan like watching him his weight just fluctuate and like doing either depending on how you think about things like doing more and more dangerous cuts and stuff just making yourself miserable and it's like for one you know how it is of like a lot of these things the paydays are getting better and everything but it's like you also want to make this a sustainable thing because you think we both know athletes who seem to be miserable 90% of the year. And you're like, that doesn't sound worth it. If you're like, you're making yourself miserable through these things and like trying to find ways to know your body. Because essentially, for most people, for a comp prep, you have 12 weeks. And I know so many people who can ruin that with a bad 12 hours leading up to comp or whatever because they did mishandled nutrition. Of you think how many people do just like severe cuts, fasting, sweat sticks, and then their refeed is just like garbage and fast food all day. And
Yeah,
then
their
they wonder
socks
why you feel
are
terrible.
here, and they just like they're sluggish. They didn't sleep. Their fingers are so swollen. I've seen that before, where
Yeah.
they have like too much sodium and not enough like balance with it. And there's so food they're not used to that they can't grab a farmer's handle
Yeah.
because their fingers are too swollen. That's like also just a huge thing. Their ankles and their feet don't fit in the shoes you're wearing. There's you
Yeah.
can again you can mess up 12 weeks, 12 hours. That was the greatest thing I've heard in a long time. That's like the perfect way to think about it.
Yeah. I was thinking about it because I was like, that really is like, you can
Yeah.
reset everything. Because I've seen people like suddenly your lever belt doesn't fit. Like, and you're, it's like all these things can really throw you off, like right leading up to those things. So I think it's nice to like have that side of things because I think one of the things that many people tend to miss about all of this in I think it's changing. It's a good paradigm that's happening is for the longest time in strongman there was this kind of like and I mean, we've been guilty of it too sometimes of like focusing very much on like the open class, which in many ways, like, who was it recently who had a good post talking about like nutrition of like stop glorifying obesity. Don't say like it's not just weight moves weight because at in the end of the day, it's crazy when you realize how many 105 athletes can do numbers almost that these open guys are doing at a significantly lower body weight.
I mean, how many '90s athletes are doing it now
Yeah.
too? If you think about it, like I did my 405-pound farmer carry for 42 feet, is what I got to, and I was talking with Gabe Pena, my coach. He's like, I've never done 400-pound farmers.
Yeah.
Like
That's an insane
the
thing.
amount of like weight class athletes that are just so immensely getting stronger. But
Hmm.
also like even opens are their own challenge though. Like they need to.
Hmm.
I was talking with Evan about this, Evan Singleton, when I saw him at the show, and like he loves my mindset on it, where it's like an open athlete is its own blessing and a curse because an open
Hmm.
athlete needs to adjust their body for the show they're doing next,
Hmm.
whether that's putting on more size or whether that's cutting down and working on their leanness. It's like even though it's like leanness, so they're still big, obviously, because they're open athletes,
Hmm.
but it's like yeah, that's something a lot of people again people understand as well. If you're trying to become this next level open athlete, it's not just about getting big, right?
Yeah.
I was talking with one athlete of mine that's an open. He's like, I need 450 grams of protein a day, and I'm just like, dude, you don't need to eat that much, honestly.
Yeah.
He's like, what? And I'm like, you're losing room, and your goal is to you're actually creating a higher thermogenesis. Your goal is to put
Hmm.
on more weight, which is good. You're eating protein, but like 450 is like a little too far. We can supplement that with more carbohydrates. So your lifts get better, so your movement patterns go in the right way, and your weight's going the direction you want it to for the next show. But we don't need that much to entice growth of muscle. Like
Yeah.
all these little factors that like people think more and surplus is better, and like to an extent it can be, but it's like training. You think more, if I'm just loading my body constantly with weight and lifting and lifting and lifting, my body's going to start, not doing exactly what I want to do. If I keep loading with one macronutrient, it's going to be like, well,
Hmm.
I need the other ones. I need carbs for the energy. I need fats for the sustainable energy. I need them for joint health. There's so much more variables that like if you just manipulate it the right way, but again, openness is its own like
Yeah.
factors too because they're like show to show basis. Like what are we doing on this prep? What are we doing on this prep?
Hmm.
So that's a whole nother ballgame. I think some of these open athletes going through the ranks take
Hmm.
that for granted too. Look at every high level athlete from like the Stoltmans. Brian Shaw was using a nutrition coach. There's so many things out
Yeah.
there. We're guilty of it. I was guilty for a long time. I waited too long to get a lifting coach,
Hmm.
and then I used nutrition coaches over the years that
Yeah.
changed everything about my weight cuts and things like that. I've taken the information I've gotten from them, plus what I was already a nutritionist, but it's like
Hmm.
outside opinions help.
Yeah.
Unbiased looking and things helps a ton, and that's whether it's lifting, eating, mindset. There's so many other things to help out with that. If you want to start growing the ranks in the sport, you have to dial it all in.
Yeah. because and it's interesting that you did bring up like the open guys because a lot of times there is this idea of just get bigger and bigger when like it would have been I think 2 years ago at the Rogue Invitational, seeing Martins hurt his bicep on the stones doing the natural stone loading or whatever it was.
Mhm.
They were odd shaped stones, but like it was interesting talking to him afterwards because I got to see him briefly and like it was interesting when he was like, I think I was just too heavy this prep. Like it changed the angles that I'm pulling these stones in because suddenly you have this moment where your whole body's changing the leverages. And you think too of like a lot of men will talk about like how the heavier they get, you're actually taking away pounds off your deadlift at times,
Yeah.
depending on how you're doing it, because suddenly you realize that the position you're getting in, you can't wedge well, and suddenly you don't think about it. But adding an extra 30 pounds of leverage over top of the bar, that changes how you're going to pull
Yeah, it's
and
a bell
stuff.
curve. It really is, especially for open athletes is on those. Is what lifts are we doing next? Are you doing double for reps? Are you doing a max deadlift? Do you need to be like what position you need? How heavy is the press for you? So okay, you're worried most about the press. Cool. We want to put more poundage on. Maybe lose 3%
Hmm.
off your deadlift, but we're gaining 8% on the press. We focus on that. And these are all things that like you have to consider when you're in that area as well. And even weight class athletes as well, like should like note this,
Hmm.
especially when they're trying to grow into a class. Like
Yeah.
as I've been trying to do is grow into the 90s, which I think I'm finally there after a whole year of eating as as controlled and proper as I should. I'm actually walking around about 94, 95 kg. And a year ago, I was walking out like 91, 92. My body fat's about the same. So it's like these are like the thought process. Like I was going through like how do I gain sustainably? How do I go from a bulk to a recomp? When do I go from bulk to recomp as well?
Hmm.
And that's knowing that about an athlete too is important. It's like again saving athletes from themselves because if you don't know, you're just gonna keep going too far, and then you have to take even longer to get back to the level we want you to be. So
Yeah, because you can't just like, I mean, I've never been the greatest about nutrition and had to change a bunch of stuff starting this year because of health complications and stuff.
yeah,
And it's interesting realizing like this point I've gone down from 91 kgs down to 81, like was weighed in at 178 was the lowest this week and stuff. And a part of it, I have lost some strength, but not nearly as much as I expected. And it's interesting how many athletes kind of just assume that like all size is good size or whatever when it's like you want quality lean contractile tissue. You don't want just like size. Like you could, if I wanted to, I could probably, it would be hard now because I can't eat as much as I like, but like you can balloon up 10 or 15 pounds of nothing, of just fluff and everything.
well, a lot of it, like I know when to recomp because it's like here's a little like free information. When your leverages change or when your athleticism changes, that's when you need to
Hmm.
recomposition. You need to see how much dense tissue you put on during your bulk.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest key factor is that you can bulk, that's fine. Like get a little fluffy, breathe a
Hmm.
little heavier when you're doing like random lifts or things like that. That's fine. Like your volume must go down a little bit. You're not doing 10 reps, you're doing 6 reps, whatever. You can get stronger doing that. But like the
Hmm.
second you're like you feel your leverages shift, or you feel like you can't like sprint as well, or like
Hmm.
move a keg or move a sandbag or things like that, you need to recomp. And when you recomp, what weight do you get to? Like when you get back to the same body
Hmm.
fat, right? And that
Yeah.
will tell you how much dense tissue you actually put on during that bulk, right? And it's important to note that because if you put on like you spent 10 weeks bulking, with a random number out there, and you're
Hmm.
2 pounds heavier after a recomp, like that's not bad, but like I feel like you left some on the table.
Hmm.
You didn't gain just 2 pounds of muscle, you probably gained a little bit of fat too.
Yeah.
But like, that's after putting on what 50, like 10, 12 pounds of weight, and you
Hmm.
spend the next 4 weeks cutting down like trying to trim the fat down. You ideally want to have like after spending 10 to 12 weeks, I'd say like 3 to 5 pounds heavier. Try to get 2 kilos from where you started. That's a quality bulk to
Hmm.
recomp. And that's not a rule of thumb. That's like relative to like more of my size
Yeah.
athletes. I would say I wouldn't say he's 64. Woman should be putting that much on, but it's relative. It's like kind of like
Yeah.
taking that down. But like that's a way to check how your bulk went. Was it just like I put on a bunch of fat and got nothing out of it? That's assuming your lifts got better too. Like I would hope
Hmm.
especially your press. I would hope your press developed well.
Yeah, and I think that's smart of change, like taking all those factors in because it's interesting when you try to have that holistic view of like, I want my press to go up, might lose 3% on my deadlift, but you don't want to lose 3% of your deadlift and also add 14 seconds to every moving event because you just can't pick things
It's,
properly of
yeah,
late.
and that's why it's important to note, like when it's severe changes, like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm 10 pounds heavier than what I normally walk around at, and I'm losing a second and a half on a yoke to sandbag medley.
Hmm.
Whatever. That's marginal, The second
Yeah.
I do comp and get my conditioning back, I'm gonna cut that off. If I'm like 8 to 10 seconds slower, or like, my transitions are weaker. That's really what I
Hmm.
noticed. The transitions are more important because that's when you make up time. So if I feel my
Yeah.
transitions are severely lacking, that's when I know. Or like if my deadlift, I can't get in my strong position.
Hmm.
That's if another muscle is taking over that doesn't normally take over. That's when I know it's a problem and I need to go back down.
Yeah.
So
And I think that that body awareness is key, but also like you said, having an unbiased person like explain like working with someone who can actually see from the outside. Because I know, at least for me, and I assume a lot of people are this way, that it's easy to get wrapped up in your own head and overthink things and start to like I've noticed a lot of people have a tendency to like wildly overcorrect then. Of like rather than say, hey, I went too far on the bulk, it's suddenly like, you know what? I just need to lose 10 pounds yesterday. And you're like, you don't want to sacrifice your performance in that time as well.
you don't want to lose what you put on.
Yeah.
You didn't do nothing. Hopefully, like you didn't just eat
Hmm.
McDonald's every day and not lift. You probably ate like in a calorie surplus of eating like hopefully like rice with some cake. Have
Hmm.
nice cookies, and then but also eating your steak or your chicken and things like that. Not just garbage. That you want to not be afraid of the process back down, and that's why the bulk to
Hmm.
recomp works so well. Like again, I'll use Andrew as or he's just finishing his
Yeah.
because he weighs in this upcoming Friday. We put him into a bulk. We got him over 220 pounds finally. I took a lot of food for him. He's a very active lifestyle and trains very hard. We got him as high as 222. I believe it was the peak we got him to, which again, he started with me. I was like 210 ish on that
Hmm.
one. So over the course of the first about 7 weeks, we were able to put good size on him, right? The second I saw that 222, I knew that was my line. I'm like, cool, going to recomp. So we
Hmm.
went to about a 3 week recomp. I know he loses fast. I noticed that with his calories, how high they had to get. So again, this is an
Hmm.
athlete specific resource. It doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
Caveat that. 3 week got him to a recomp. He went from 222 to 218 to 216, and then he started 214. Was when I saw it right before we went into the maintenance phase. So
Hmm.
he put on roughly 6 pounds,
Yeah.
dense mass. Again, training his ass off, like not even going to take
Hmm.
away from his coach. His coach did an amazing job. I work directly with his coach too. So all my athletes that I speak with, I talk to their coaches, like what's their training cycle looking like? And I tailor the food that they need, or the nutrients they need to that training cycle, right? So we were able to do that. And he like literally was like, wow, this is probably one of the best prep he's had. He had like 3 PRs, even when we put him in a slight recomp deficit. And then we started his cut, and he's like I said, about 4 kilos away after bloating himself up. He's going to make weight so easy. So I'm stoked
Yeah.
for him. And then he's again hit 3 PRs on the way. So
Yeah.
what more can you ask for?
No, I think that's good. And I think part of what I think is helpful about that is thinking it's interesting how you see how many people just throw out these arbitrary numbers of like a 10% weight cut's fine or whatever. And you're like, that actually, the percentages
So
depend on how body fat and everything. First, if you're,
10%
if,
massive. 10% is the most anyone
yeah,
should do, but you also have to be super lean to be able to make a
mhm,
10% cut. Like I
yeah,
have made a
like Darren
10%
is
cut.
consistently lean and
Yeah.
everything,
But like
but
to
you
make a
have to have that
10% cut, I
level.
had to be close to single digit body fat.
Hmm.
Like people understand
Yeah,
your fat doesn't hold water. Your
yeah,
fat takes time to lose. You have to work and it takes time. That's two things that fat takes to lose. Water
hmm,
you can pull. The more muscle you have in your body, the more water your body has. That's why someone that has a lot of muscle can fluctuate the most overnight. How much water
hmm,
they're shifting. So I usually when I design a cut for an athlete, I ask them a few times. I'm like, hey, what's the most you've ever cut from? First of all,
hmm.
well, how did that go? Right? So
Yeah,
if someone's like, "Oh, I've done, 2%. Okay, you're not getting 10%. Nope.
Yeah.
I'll go near that. Maybe I'll give you 3 or 4%.
Mhm.
If you're like, oh, it went great, I did like a 3% cut. I'm like, cool, we can push it to 5 or 6 because I'm very confident in myself and
Mhm.
I know that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, it depends. The body fat depends on different principles of that one. The leaner you are, the more you can lose. Like
Mhm.
when I did my 14% cut to
Yeah.
make weight, I was like single digit, like abs on abs on abs. Like when
Mhm.
we sucked all the water out, it was every water in my muscle.
Yeah.
And fortunately, when I went to compete, I got hurt, which is another factor of when you cut too much.
Mhm.
I was able to perform and still make the finals, like after blowing my knee out, but I still blew my knee out on the first event. So
Yeah.
like the more you cut, the more you put your body at risk for these injuries to happen as well. So there's no arbitrary number. Like that's the thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Anything, honestly, I'm pretty comfortable. Anything 4% or below for anybody that's understands I can guide someone through that. I'm
Mhm.
comfortable guiding someone through that. 2% or below, you can kind of get away with it, be fine. You can make weight on
Yeah.
it. I don't see anybody. It's hard to mess that up, honestly. If you just do like general Google search how to water cut,
Mhm.
it's really easy to do it the wrong way on like 5 to 10%. Like 6% is like that line where it's like, okay, well, if you mess this up, you'll be sweating a lot. And then if you sweat a
Mhm.
lot, your performance goes down. If you know how
Yeah.
to do it and you're lean enough, 6% can feel like 3% or 2%. It's a little uncomfortable. It's annoying, but like it's not going to affect anything. And if you've done six, you can, and that went great, and you get leaner for the next cut. I call it graduating. You can graduate to a 7 or 8 if we want to talk about that.
Mhm.
You know, once someone gets to about 10, though, I tell people like you shouldn't be doing over like 8% unless you're going for a world record or world title or you're getting a fat paycheck. Like,
Yeah. And
like
I think
it's brutal, dude. Like it's not a fun time. But the times I did over 10%, or like even close to 10% was for my American slash world record deadlift attempt, which I hit the American record. I did it for when it was Clash of the 80s. I did it for that show. OSGs, and people are doing heavy cuts for like a local show. Like, no, you're not. No, don't be doing that. It's not good long term. And it's okay to challenge yourself in the next class if you're not lean enough for the lower class. It's just and because like most of the time, if you have to cut that much for a local show, your strength isn't there to be in that class yet, to be at that elite
Mhm.
level yet, to be doing that. So why are you taking time away from your strength development? Because every time you cut, you lose strength somewhat,
Mhm.
especially
Yeah.
major, anything over 6, 7%. So you're making for the short term gain of making weight and competing at the show at a lighter class because you feel an advantage. You're making your next 6 months tougher, or your
Mhm.
next year tougher if you do it again. That you're not developing. If you just like, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself. I might get fifth instead of third in the next class up, or sixth instead of third in the next class up. A year from then, you can either be getting leaner and then get first or second in that class, or learn that you can be competitive with the class up and get fourth or fifth that year, take another year, and then climb again. It's not a quick game for most people, honestly. As we talked about in the first podcast, I didn't make my first nationals before they even had podium gets in until my 5th year in strongman. Like
Yeah.
it's really easy to be like glorifying the highs and the how everything developed. It's really hard to reflect on like not everybody's a phenom that comes out of nowhere.
Mhm.
Most people are kind of like my journey, and people
Yeah.
look at me now like, oh, you're one of the best at this and this and this. I'm like, I'm good. I admit I believe I'm one of the best in the world, but I didn't start there, and
Yeah.
it took me a long time. This is like, man, I'm 33 this year, and that's my 10th year. Once we get near the end of the year, like it's been a
Mhm.
while for me, man.
Yeah, and it does, like, it takes time, and I think I'm really glad you mentioned the thing of, like, what paycheck are you going for? What are you, like because the thing is, like, you are doing something dangerous of, like because essentially, especially when people do those dangerous cuts, the best way I could think of to describe it is it's a lot like saying, "Hey, I know my car's low on oil. I'm just gonna run it and see what happens because I wanna save 80 bucks right now." It's like, you might save 80 bucks right now, or, as I did years ago, my engine just overheated and one of the pistons shot through the engine block. And that was way more expensive than the $80 oil
Yeah,
change I was trying to
and
save.
again, you can get away with it for a long
Yeah.
time. You can.
Yeah.
Some people get away with it longer than others. Some people like do it once and
Mhm.
they find out the hard way that things can go wrong, or they
Yeah.
go, "Oh, I've always done it this way," and it gets severe and severe and severe. That's kind of again. I'm not trying to glorify it by any means. That's the route I took. I'm like, oh, I'm able
Mhm.
to make it. I'm able to make it. And then like it got sketchy, like real sketchy. Like I couldn't like, for Clash of the '80s. My cut, I made weight, went did all the process, did everything proper. It was just a big cut. My stomach acids were so fried, I couldn't eat for 3 days. I could not eat solid food.
Mhm.
Like for the refeed, I was eating watermelon and drinking smoothies, and I still performed because I know how to get the
Mhm.
nutrients. I knew what I was looking for. Again, I had a great coach, Beck Lord. Did an amazing job adapting to what my stomach did. Again, she only supported that I did that big of a cut because I was going for a world title in that and a paycheck, like a
Yeah.
big payday. So like that's the reason why I was supported that way. And justify the means sometimes. And I did great, took third and got paid. But like that's something I'll never forget. Is like I could during the show I couldn't eat solid food. I could
Mhm.
only eat watermelon. That's the only food I could have, or my stomach acid would just burn. And that didn't go away for 48 hours.
Mm.
And that's something I never forget. So going in, I need to be aware of like prebiotic, probiotic, but I'm never going to that big of a cut again. But like these are
Mhm.
factors that can happen to anybody. And this is not my that wasn't my first time doing a high cut. It was my first time my body did that. And
Yeah.
like again, luckily I had the right support around me to adapt and bounce back from that. But like, what if an athlete doesn't?
Mhm.
And then they learn that their stomach acids are firing wrong and they eat acidic foods, for example, and they end up in the hospital. Yeah,
Yeah.
versus the alcohol use. Like these are things that can happen if you don't know you don't know what you don't know, and
Mhm.
then if you don't have the right people around you, especially when you do extreme things like this.
Yeah, and that makes a huge difference. As someone who did end up in the hospital last month with stomach issues, I can tell you that yeah, it is like it's weird when you realize that your body just cannot handle something that like in maybe a normal circumstance you could, but like these days I've had to like cut out almost everything because the acid reflux has just gotten so bad and stuff. And I think it's this idea of like for you that makes sense. If it's like to use the car example, like running your car on low oil if you have a big payday or something you're going towards, like that might be worth it. But just doing it for just a local show or like just because you don't have time, like that could destroy your car and hurt your car. But also people do that with their bodies all the time. And I think the hard thing is, and I think it's changing, like, thank goodness for chaos and PSL and stuff. But for the longest time, there are still like some major federations that sometimes will have shows on for these weight class athletes without decent paydays. And you're like, you're asking these people to risk injury, especially if it's a high level thing. And that should be the reward should match that risk. And so
Yeah.
many times it's like, oh well, don't you just want like the title of like such and such strongest? You're like,
Yes,
is
but
that yeah, but also you need to get paid for it because I think at this point there is enough like weight class shows and stuff that like we can't keep supporting bad promoters and people
yeah,
who aren't like putting stuff up because one of the best conversations you and I had is like especially once you reach that high level thing of part of your responsibility to the athletes around you and people around you is like don't support these bad shows or don't support shows that aren't treating the athletes the level that you would like because at the end it makes it seem okay because it's one of those things where they're like well maybe they're not doing prize money this year but they might next year so that's why I'm doing it this year. It's like don't do it. Don't like because if they did it if they realize they could get away without paying you this time they're going to do it in the future. We
yeah,
see it all the time. Companies will do that if they're like oh we realize that we can just make flying worse and worse and make our snacks smaller and no meals and people will still fly. They never got the meals back. They're
yeah,
just like, oh, well, we could put on a U80 or U90 show without decent prize money and people will still show up. Like what's their incentive at that point to
yeah. I
pay
mean,
athletes?
we're lucky we're in this point where like the weight
Mhm.
class athletes is getting growing across the board. Um,
Yeah.
and I think anyone that knows me, I'm an outspoken advocate for the
Mhm.
athletes. Like I said, I've raised prize money for athletes for a show I wasn't even competing in. That
Mhm.
I felt like they were not being supported the way they should. I'm not going to name names or anything, especially here.
Yeah.
But,
No, yeah.
if you know, you know. But
Mhm.
and it's just like, and it wasn't to like take slight at anybody. It's the fact that like trying to get what we deserve because it is a risk every time we step up there. Every time we train, like I get hurt training. I'm dealing with an injured
Mhm.
shoulder right now, just from training. Um, every especially when we go on to the stage,
Mhm.
and we're the performance. We're the ones giving the crowd what they're looking for. It's not these companies. And I don't want to turn this podcast into that, but it's not these
Oh,
corporations.
yeah.
We're
Yeah.
the show. It's not just me. It's not just you. It's everyone, the athletes that steps up there. Our
Mhm.
job is to perform, but we're also putting ourselves at a high risk because of what we do is even in every level is dangerous to an extent because we're lifting odd, heavy things. No matter how
Mhm.
hard we work, we're every risk we have. Um, and I think once you get to the level where these companies are making money off us, we deserve some of that back, and that's just what I view. And
Yeah. Then yeah, and I think that's important, and I think it's nice of, like, we try generally not to pick on people as much as we can on the show and stuff because, at the end of the day, I think there's this weird reaction, and it's changing more and more, but for the longest time in strongman, it really was this, like, "Well, this is strongman, don't complain," like, "This is strongman," and I think it was great the Metal Mayhem 3 I went to that was hosted by Heavy Metal Fit down here in San Antonio, when at the awards thing, um, blanking on his name and it drives me insane. But the owner of heavy metal, he was talking about, he was like, one of the things I absolutely hate hearing is, well, this is strongman. He was like, that's not an excuse for things to be bad. Because it's one of those things that people are like, well, this is strongman. Sometimes the weights are wrong, the payouts don't happen, all these things. And you're like, that's not good. Like you can't normalize these things. And I think it's like, of course, like you want to offer constructive solutions because I think people tend to miss this idea of like they'll oftentimes just call it straight out, right? They'll just be like, well, this is toxic, like talking about the bad parts. And you're like, it can be toxic if there's no solutions,
yeah,
but it's not toxic to say, hey, this isn't a good situation. How can we change this? Like, what can
yeah,
we do?
it's
Because, yeah,
people need to be more open to conversation, right?
yeah.
You're allowed to have opinions. You're allowed to talk about it. And like I said, people seem to be open to conversation. Like why
Mhm. Yeah.
this? Why $1 million companies can't give any prize money or certain weight classes? Tell
Yeah.
me why. Oh, because they don't show up. Well, they're not showing up because they're not paying them, and they will over there. Like, why would I
Mhm.
risk my body for this title, which is cool, it's awesome.
Mhm.
But like when I can go like shout out to Bricktown. They paid me
Yeah.
$1,000 in first place. That was a local. That was like a USS Pro qualifier. You know,
Mhm.
like shout out to them. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go do that show. Like I'm not
Yeah.
greedy, but like I also don't want to go broke doing this sport.
Yeah. And I think it's those key things because realizing even when we got to hang out there at like Colorado Strongest, like people putting up that prize money, you and Kim both walked away with like more money than there has been at some like pro level things.
Yeah, and
And
that's
you're like,
like
that's crazy.
and like why are you doing this show? I'm like because they put $1,000 in the log, and then I'm gonna do the rest of the show because I love this sport.
Yeah.
That's
And
it's one of those things. Like, there's nothing wrong with having your motives. Like, if your motives are like, I want to win this title, awesome. Like,
mhm.
perfect. Just have your reason. Like, I want, to not. I had to get my car fixed, and a
Mhm.
grand will fix a car.
Yeah.
And I got this talent where I can lift a heavy log above my head. Whew, we're gonna go for it.
Yeah, and I think that's the key part because I think overall, like rising tide carries all ships and stuff. And I think more and more people need to get out of that mindset of like there are only certain shows you should do if you're a big athlete or whatever. Like I
Yeah,
agree that you shouldn't be punching down, like you shouldn't be like. But it's interesting when you had some people when like talking to Gabe Pino when he was talking about not doing World's Strongest Man or the Shaw Classic, but he was still doing America's Strongest Man or like some other shows. It was interesting because people they were like, "Oh, but when are you doing the real shows?" And it's like more and more of these shows, these I would consider like mid-level shows, are having weights that are very close to what used to be records and stuff.
yeah.
Because, like you said, you have a U90 athlete doing 405 per hand for farmers. Like that's world class level right there. and stuff. Like these things go up, and I think the thing is to say like going somewhere where there's a payday, like that's super important because at the end of the day, like you can't do this forever.
Well, here's also the thing though,
Yeah.
and I was talking with Tyler Purdue about this one. Like I've been going to the USS Pro qualifiers. I've done both of them so far this year. They've had. I took first and second
Hmm.
at those shows.
Yeah.
At 220, it's a weight class above what I do, but that shouldn't matter either way.
Hmm.
Big athletes supporting these people that are paying you will make them want to pay you more because
Hmm.
that puts more eyes on the show they're putting on, so they can raise more money, so they can give more back to the athletes.
Hmm.
It's one of those things that like the more the athletes that have this ability, that have this, you know, pedestal they can work from, do these shows. It's not greedy. It's not.
Hmm.
It's yeah. It's I'm motivated. I want to win. I want to make money. Cool. Like, but
Hmm.
it's also like it's showing that like, oh, this is what gets people here. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is this will get me to a show. Like I love paying rent by doing my favorite sport. It's a lot. It's two birds with one stone. Like it's there's nothing but like, and it gets more eyes on the show that's going on. They can use an athlete as promotion because we
Hmm.
are tools to be used like with that factor. But again, I don't want my likeness to be used unless I'm getting something out of it.
Yeah, because you
Right?
realize now with social media and stuff, like these companies and people are using your image to get thousands of visitors and thousands of
Yeah.
views towards whatever they're putting. And I think that's also the time that we're in a very unique space with the way the internet works. That for a lot of these local shows or smaller shows, all you need to do is have some really good viral moments, and everyone's going to have their eyes on that and
Yeah.
stuff. And now, surprisingly enough, people tend to perform better when there are rewards that match the risk, or if the rewards are higher than the risk,
Yeah,
that's
and
even
then these
better.
athletes that are great, like you, it's like say Tyler Davis goes to a show in Alabama, and like they can
Hmm.
promote that. Well,
Yeah.
people want to see him perform.
Yeah.
People pay the whatever $5, $10 to watch the show. And they get an extra 20
Hmm.
people or 10 people. They want to see insert athlete here do the show. Well, that show just made more money. Okay, so how do we
Hmm.
entice Tyler to do this show besides his love for the
Yeah.
sport? Well, he's not going to do every show, but if you're like, hey, first prize is $1,000, he thinks he can win it. Yeah, he's probably going to do it. Like,
Yeah. Because that makes a huge difference
it does.
and
It, like
stuff.
again, this sport ain't cheap.
Yeah, because and at the end of the day, for the longest time, especially for small promoters, it was this idea of the way to get eyes on your show or make people want to do your show is by being sanctioned. Sanctioning costs $1,000,
Yeah,
and oftentimes, like there are so many sanctioned shows, you're not standing out of the pile at all. And I think we're starting to see of like, shout out Chris Ellison did a phenomenal job with the EFI Limit Breakers. He did the
oh
live
yeah.
stream himself, like things look stellar there and
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, it was great. I love being a part of that show. I love being.
Yeah.
I was not able to make it out there, but he made it work with me and CJ
Hmm.
Pierce to be commentary for that. And I thought we got a lot of good feedback. So hopefully you enjoyed
Yeah.
the live commentary on that end and kind of bringing that. Even though we were watching from like literally this room I'm in right now, I was watching the show to make it happen. But like he did an amazing job, and he was so great to work with. He was almost
Hmm.
over prepared how much stuff he has
Oh
to
yeah.
go wrong, which is great. Like, and he's a
Hmm.
promoter that cares, and like that's going to athletes show up, and he wants prize money to increase. He wants to work hard to get
Yeah.
paid more next year, increase classes. Like this is where the sport needs to go to grow, because that's how you get more eyes on it by getting better performances, by getting the best athletes there, by able to promote it on social media to see, insert gym guy here that didn't even know there was a weight class now can go try it.
Hmm.
So it's just like, you know, promoters, again, a lot of promoters are doing their best, they're doing great jobs. It's just like that's something I think would help them think about that. And it's just what investment they need to make, what return on investment. Like I signed up for a show in December, and the promoter DM'd me thanking me for signing up, and I thought that was great and super
Hmm.
nice. Because he's like, do you mind if I use your promotion when we close the show?" I'm like, "Dude, go for it! Like you're putting prize
Yeah.
money here. I'm showing up to your show to try to win it. Sure, maybe you get some more people to watch it. I don't care. Like there's incentive for me. I'm getting something.
Yeah.
Work together."
And
So
I think that's key and stuff because it is like I mean, Chris is just a wonderful guy. Though, like, it was crazy when I told people, I was like, he was using his own live stream software and
Yeah, you made
everything.
all that.
Like he does everything from top to bottom. And I think oftentimes people tend to kind of to tie it back into our original conversation. People kind of overcomplicate running shows in the same way they overcomplicate nutrition. In a way of like, there's
Oh,
this idea of like you do want to be prepared and stuff, but people either need a lot of times people either think it'll just happen if you believe in it enough, and it's like no, these things take time of like I think it's great you mentioned the social media aspect because I think a lot of promoters don't realize how much of a difference it makes to have those like collaboration posts and like these people promoting it because at the end of the day now, like, I mean, you could spend $8,000 on a billboard here in Austin, or you could just have someone do a really cool lift that 100,000 people see, 2,000 people like. All you need is a percent of that percent to buy your $5 live stream, and you've made the prize money right there
yeah,
and stuff.
yeah,
And I think it's hard though because I think there's still people who don't always like see where things are moving. But I think that's part of like why you're saying it's important to have like the whole package and stuff. Like you are an athlete, but you also understand the nutrition side, but also the social media side and what else goes into this of I think trying to create like a positive ecosphere, an environment to like for things to thrive. Because at the end of the day, like it could be very easy to like be critical and caustic without offering solutions. But it's like, no, you've shown that these things like work. The fact that like Chris was able to get two remote commentators for a local show, essentially like a local show that he ran the live stream on, like that's incredible and
yeah,
stuff. And it worked up well. Like for one, I will say having the live stream on YouTube was amazing because at one point CJ Pierce's mic was out and I just commented, I was like, hey, like I think you might be muted. And he was able to be like, oh, the sound's bad. Like, thank you so much for like
yeah,
telling me this. And it's interesting because so many other live streams without that like active commentary part and stuff, like you would just miss it. Because I've seen live streams where the sound was literally cut out for like 10 minutes. And you're just like, well, would be nice to know what's happening right now with commentators, but I guess I'm just like, hopefully I can see what's on the little flipboards right there and like read what's going on. So I think
but
that
yeah,
I'm glad you talked about that because I think that's the
yeah. I
main
mean,
thing is yeah.
understanding what the growth needs to happen with the sport and get more eyes on it. Like that's again, this is my
Yeah.
favorite thing. Like literally, my favorite thing is the sport.
Mhm.
So I want to see it grow as far as again. I've always said that like I have my own personal goals. I have my lifting goals. I want to get a world record. I want to get a world title. Those are two of my lifting
Mhm.
goals. But my biggest goal of like what my impact on the sport I always want this to be is like my in the back of my mind. I want to leave this sport better than what I found it as.
Mhm.
And I think I'm doing that and I'm doing my best to always do that. And that's always in the back of my mind in anything that I do.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because it is this like when you and I are talking about like doing this episode and stuff. For one, I'm very proud of myself for not needing a guest co-host. For some reason, I always like to have like an
No, you did great.
extra
It's a
thing.
great job.
But
Yeah.
yeah, the
I also
interesting
so
yeah, I was like, this is nice. But I think it's like it's an interesting thing to think about like what are these little ways you can drive the sport forward because it's crazy of like and we don't have like the biggest reach in the world with this show but it's interesting to see the difference it's made once you have people like Chris Ellison looking for feedback for like BFI limit breakers next year. You have the Barretts like Brando and Rosalinda, they're wonderful. They're doing the Olympic City Pro Am next
I'll
month,
be judging
which
on the deadlifts.
we'll be there. Yeah, and then we'll get to hang out again because that's the nice thing is like people I think it's interesting because like you are like a super driven focused person. Like I think I got to say 5 words to you at OSG because you're so busy. But I didn't mind because it is like at the end of the day, that passion is important. And I think and it's interesting when like people sometimes kind of miss those things and stuff that like at the end of the day, even before like you were an athlete and stuff, you wore our shirts and stuff enough that Darren thought you were already an athlete and announced it before like I had even considered like it had been in the back of my mind. But it was interesting to like think about these like little steps you can take of like supporting the brands you like and the people that support you. Like it was interesting to realize like I sent you 2 shirts to make up for the fact that I bumped you for Andrew Clayton and everything. And I guess for some reason you show up the week after Andrew
It's,
Clayton.
it's
It's
how this
like,
goes.
this is new.
Yeah,
I was like, this is a very familiar pattern actually. It's like
yeah,
that. But I think the difference though it all makes is like trying to make the athlete experience better and sustainable. Because I think it's one of these things of like we're saying, now you're feel free to use the trademark thing of like don't let 12 hours ruin 12 weeks of prep, like, but
I'm
it
a,
can be
I'm stealing that so bad.
like,
That is going to be a thing.
yeah, because it really is like it's interesting to think about like all these aspects. And a part of it, like the way to enjoy this sport, one of the core foundations is like proper nutrition and proper sleep and stuff. Like that can make the difference of
Yep.
like you can be a world class athlete. And if you don't understand your nutrition properly, you can be either leaving pounds on the table or losing pounds by not necessarily keeping all these things in step. And I think that difference of like, now we've seen this point, like OSG had such a stacked class that all it took was one extra person being there in the finals and shook everything up and stuff because things are like that close and everything. And I think these like moments of realizing like being prepared for anything and everything is super important because I think it's interesting to think about that of like using Derek Owens as an example of like being able to jump in last minute when he hadn't planned and street clothes. Like that's the level of preparedness high level athletes need. And I think it's interesting when you talked about how the refeed is actually like one of the most important parts of the cut because so often people are just kind of like, they're like, you know what, screw it. We're going to Dairy Queen,
Yeah.
Blizzards, like
And,
pizza.
and it's also understanding a multi-day shows once people reach that level. It's also a bunch of variables. Like we can have a whole nother podcast about that one. I think we're moving towards over the hour mark of this one, but
Oh yeah.
I do want to say, I think it's to bring it back to supporting brands. If you guys
Mhm.
have been listening for this long, my website is going to be launching this week, gsknutrition.com. And so it might not be up when this goes live, but by this weekend it will be live. Anybody that brings up the podcast when you reach out to me, I'm gonna give 20% off of their if they do monthly. If they want to do a prep, or if they want to like just do a water cut, do water, you get 20% off just for being a supporter of this show and listen to the podcast all the way through this time frame. So just keep that. Whoever's listening in right now, make sure when you email me about applying or about working with me, that you bring up that you heard it from Will Sean's Opinions podcast, and I'll make sure that 20%. And again, it's for literally, if you're doing monthly, you get it for the whole duration you're working with me, or you get it for the whole
Mhm.
prep. So it's not just a 1 month thing. So
That's good to know. And I could also cut that part and put it early in the show if need be. So that
I
way
mean, whatever works.
get some multiple
I don't
things.
mind people if they have to wait an hour to listen to it. That means they really enjoyed what we were saying, and that means they really enjoyed the show as well. I want to support everyone as best I can, but also want to support this podcast that does so much for me being one of your athletes as well. So hopefully they listened for the full hour and they enjoyed it this whole time.
And I think that does like that brings an interesting note to something I've been kind of dwelling on and thinking about recently is I think people tend to kind of get lost in like the numbers game of like everything of this idea of like how many people are doing this, how many people are like, and you could have 1,000 people watch your show, but if they only watch the first few minutes, that doesn't like go anywhere. Like in the end, those core people who are supporting you, who like everything you do and listen to the end of your shows and like support resharing stuff and everything, like that's your core people you want to grow. And I think this like mindset of like trying to make things more sustainable because I think we're all starting to see kind of what happens when let's say certain like larger federations and stuff just like rely on just new people coming in all the time but don't focus on retention. It's like at the end of the day you can't just only bank on novice lifters who are excited. You can't be, and for the longest time there really was this pattern of like you kind of alienate veteran lifters and like you just rely on like new excited people, but you don't want this thing that like this pattern of like having 5% of experienced people and then 95% of new people and then you're just losing this burnout period. So I think that's like a brief little tie in of like focusing on those people who also support you. and
Yeah,
stuff.
and I really hope that like the people that start working with me like what I'm doing with them, and they stay with me a long time, and they save a lot of money, and they get the best performance that they could get out of any kind of nutrition work that I do. So
Yeah, because
I
that
don't.
makes a huge difference.
Oh yeah, I'm very confident, and I have testimonials from. You'll see it on the website. Many high level athletes that competed at OSG. Like I said, I brought 5 athletes to that competed at PSL. That I brought multiple athletes that have done that I've worked with. Like I can more than 10. I've done over 30 water cuts, and I've had 0 athletes miss weight or underperform after making weight. And that's 30 athletes, like more than that's just like I know I've done that. So I'm very confident in the product I'm bringing. So I want to be able to do that for anything people are climbing the ranks on the cusp or the highest level. I've worked with all of them, and I want to keep bringing that.
Yeah. And I think that's important of like you're saying you do have like the 12-week thing, but also like the monthly and stuff. Because I think you realize like it's interesting when you mentioned the 415 grams of protein, how many people like are literally just kind of losing money, kind of hemorrhaging money on their nutrition and stuff. Because at the end of the day, like nutrition, like depending on the protein powder or whatever you're using for your protein, like you don't want to be wasting more than you have to.
Yeah.
And so many people, it's kind of this idea of just more is more, and
Yeah,
it's
and
like that's
I
not
have
true.
no sponsored brands. I have nothing. I'm going to be telling you exactly like how to guide. Like I have no affiliates with anything. So I'm not going to be like, go buy this protein powder, or go buy this. Like no, if I believe it's you think you. If I like whole foods in general, so I usually tell
Hmm.
people to eat. But I'll give
Yeah.
recommendations. But there's no like insert brand here is paying me on the side. So I'm going to tell you to go buy their stuff. No, I just want people to
Hmm.
get the best out of their nutrition and perform the best and see how big we can make this sport and where we can grow to. And I think that's the next step is we got great coaches, we've got great athletes. Let's feed them properly to be the best they can be.
Yeah, because I think that is super important of trying to like keep this sustainable and stuff. And I think finding those ways to like be able to make money doing what you love while helping people and stuff. Because at the end of the day, it's interesting how many people will sometimes like bulk or like worry about like paying a coach for X or whatever, but then they don't consider of like some. I know tons of people will spend like literally hundreds of dollars a month on supplements and protein powder and stuff that like if you're not managing that well, you're literally just money down the drain
Yeah,
and
you got a
stuff.
$300 supplement bill with a $5 nutrition education. It's going to be a long road ahead of you. It's
Yeah, and that's the main thing is like trying to create these sustainable things. Because also I like the fact that you're talking about with Andrew and stuff of like telling him the whys of why you're doing all these cuts. Because I think sometimes, and a lot of people have gotten much better about it, but for a while there used to be this thing of like coaches almost trying to keep things in a black box so that way people stayed with them of it just being like kind of like just let me do everything for you, like I'm helping you. It's like, no, you need to understand why you're doing why you
I
do.
mean, not saying it doesn't happen. I've had
Oh
athletes do
yeah.
one prep with me and leave, and like, but majority of my athletes come back for that
Yeah.
next prep, or a majority of them. Like, I've had one of my athletes, Katara Taylor. She's been with me for over 2 years. She's lost almost 50 total pounds. Competed at 2 different PSLs. Competed at OSG at
Hmm.
lower weight classes she's ever competed, and hit PRs along the way. Like, this is someone
Yeah.
that, and she's been with me nonstop, and she keeps getting stronger. And now we're our next phase to try to get her leaner and stronger to go down another weight class. She's not a very tall athlete, so she's new goals, and this is something she never thought she'd be able to do when we started talking to each other. And that's like maybe that's your path, like, and maybe you're someone like Tyler Davis who does a prep with me. Awesome. When his next
Hmm.
prep starts, he's going to jump back in because he took so much from the prep that he's using it, which I'm
Hmm.
fine with that. If you're able to be
Yeah.
that person that doesn't need that adaptation all the time, yeah, and
Hmm.
he's like, I'll contact you when I got to do another cut to make sure it goes as smooth. I'm perfect. Like I don't,
Hmm.
I'm not trying to hide my secret sauce. I'm like, but the more I work with somebody, the better I can make it too. So if I worked with someone year round, I can dial it in for their in season, off season, their next show. We can get it perfect. But there's no whatever seat on the bus someone wants to take, I'm willing to support and I want to support them. So
Yeah. Because that's huge. I think it is like trying to offer those services and stuff. Because it is like when things are busy and everything, like it is a super important thing to bank off of and stuff. And the nice thing is, I think like you were saying, of like being able to, this is one thing I forgot to mention that I was like, should have, is like when you were talking about, you posted a story, tagged us in it, of like how like you've been having issues with your back or your erectors, and you were like, singles feel good, but I'm not going to push it and stuff. And I think it's like a great sign of like maturity and also humility of like knowing like, I'm not going to do this extra rep just because it's on the program if my body like this will make things worse and stuff. And I think it's like that, what that illustrates to me is like, for one, you're a really high level athlete, but you also understand like the longevity of this. Like, why are you possibly risk extra injury for one workout just for Instagram or whoever? Like,
Yeah, and that's why I honestly posted that story. I was just like, let's just make. I just want to make this thing like it's not. It wasn't the cleanest rep I ever did. It wasn't anything crazy. It's a routine lift for me. It's heavy. It's not. I
mhm.
respect the weight, and like
Yeah.
something fell off, so I pulled back, and my director was just like, okay, we're not doing this. And like I was supposed to do three, and I'm like, I know I could do three.
Hmm.
Like not trying to like I know I have three in the tank, but it's like what damage I doing for next week's workout. And like that's just something that I think to bring up like athletes need to understand that and it goes the same thing with nutrition. Something doesn't feel right, talk to your coach. And it's good to have someone that can adapt and things like that. And just it's not written in stone, it never is. And
Hmm.
that's the biggest thing. And having the right support system and understanding how to adapt is the best piece that any athlete can grow. And this is how we grow to the level. If you have big goals, you need to get the right people around you.
Yeah, and I think this kind of ties into, Darren put up a story about it recently, of this idea of like, a lot of athletes, like this isn't their full-time thing, they have dynamic lives, so you need to be able to plan around those things and stuff. And I think it's interesting to be able to think about that, because I think especially too, that comes down to the nutrition thing of being able to say like, hey, here's the time you can have your cake so you can enjoy your time with your family or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's
whereas like so many people just won't do that because they're afraid of messing up their nutrition, so they'll like miss important family occasions or something or whatever, because this fear of like nutrition being kind of a black box of
no,
like,
I
yeah,
never do that. I never like guide anyone that way. You can talk to Tyler about that because
yeah,
he had like Thanksgiving in the middle of the prep. Like
yeah,
we made sure to make it work, and like I don't want to miss out on anything with his family. Like I have one athlete, Grace. She works with me every month, and she's doing the European Pro Strongman this weekend, and she's a nurse, so she works for
hmm,
12 hours. She can't track that. So what we do is like, okay, we're gonna map out the best we can do. We know she undereats those days, so I gave her more calories about on the not on the days she can track, and then
hmm,
I look at her weight shifts, and if it stays where I want it to be, okay, cool. We'll just don't worry about eat what you feel like during your work shift or what you can, and then get back on track the next day. And that's how you work on someone's busy life.
yeah,
Like
because that
it's
makes
real
a
easy
huge
to be like, you
difference.
have to hit these every single day. Like, no, that's not sustainable for this person. You need to be able to adapt with them. Would it be easier? Would it make my job easier if someone could just like listen to everything I said, stick to the T, and they can just prep all their food and look at everything they need to do and map it out? Yeah, but like it's not life. It's
Yeah,
like you can use educated reasoning to predict how many extra calories do I need to feed you on day two because day one you worked a 12-hour shift and you couldn't track and you underate.
yeah, and I
And
think
then
that's the key.
and if it goes the right way and I see the shift I want, that's what we focus on for now. If it doesn't go enough or too much, okay, we pull back or add, and that's just it's that simple, but it's also that complicated.
Yeah,
That's
and I think that's helpful of like these ideas, because I think one thing that people oftentimes miss about like athletics and nutrition is that, at least for me, if I'm stressed out, my body for some reason will just add 7 pounds of water weight that week, just for just the cortisol levels, and just like
yeah,
just general stress. And I think people don't always realize these things of like, kind of like, to use that example with like a 12-hour shift and stuff. In fact, if for whatever reason she was made to feel like anxious, be like, oh, I need to keep track of everything, that stress could actually just offset the progress that you're making in general, just
everything's
this
going.
fear. And to say like, it's not realistic for someone who's on their feet for 12 hours to have to take notes on everything they're doing,
Yeah,
like
well,
she's already there,
I
you
also
know?
ask my clients weekly, like I give them a questionnaire every Monday, is what their stress level is as well. If we're
Mhm,
seeing shifts happen and their stress level's at a 9, I'm like, okay, I can predict they're gonna be heavy, you know?
mhm,
How's your sleep quality? That's also a question I ask. If your sleep quality is a 2 out of 10, okay, we're probably gonna be a little bit heavy.
mhm.
There's certain things I don't need to worry about. But let's say she gained 3 pounds and her stress is an 8, her sleep's a 3. Cool, you probably gained water. Maybe a little bit
Mhm.
of overeating here and there, under eating, that's fine. It's just your body adapting. But if you're like stress is a 1 and your sleep's a 9 and you're up 3 pounds, okay, we got to pull some calories.
Yeah.
And these are variables that like I take into account as well, especially like one of my athletes right now, he's trying to get he's towards bicep. His goal right now is to continue to get back to keep his body in check. So when he's healed, he can come back to the sport and still be a U105 athlete and ready for that,
Mhm,
right? But he just has big stress shifts. So I need to keep that in mind. Like this week, he gained 4 pounds, and I'm like, okay, how was your sleep quality? And he's like, honestly, I'm not that great, and I ate a little bit later than normal. Like, cool. So I know this is water. But
mhm,
like his heavy days, when this does happen, are 10 pounds lighter than they used to be.
mhm,
That's a net positive. I'm not berating him for a 4 pound gain from Thursday to Monday because he's 10 pounds on his heaviest days lighter than what it used to be. And then the
mhm.
second he gets that sleep in check, I know he's going to be back to where he was or below.
Yeah,
These
'cause
are factors, and berating him or like talking down to him or not working with him just going to make it worse. And these are things that I bring to the table, I think, is just empathy.
yeah. And that makes a huge difference because at the end of the day, the less people have to worry about their nutrition, the better they do. Of like, good friend of the show who I bring up all the time and stuff, like Emmanuel Pescari does really well because he doesn't have to worry about cuts and stuff. Like he pretty much walks around all the time at like 235 at the most, or like 107, 109, or whatever it is in kilograms. And that makes a big difference because I think oftentimes people, when you're constantly worrying about that nutrition side, that's why we do see these athletes who will do amazing up until like a few weeks out from prep and stuff. And then it's like things start to crash once you're like suddenly doing these like wild cuts of like, especially if like, because most people, their thing typically seems to be just like 2 weeks out, just like suddenly just cut out like all salt and carbs or whatever, like these drastic, like changing everything
Yeah,
and
and
stuff.
don't get me started on that kind of mindset. That drives me nuts when people do that. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's
Cause
throwing it
that's,
all away. And also, it's just because you're stressed, you don't trust the process. Like,
yeah.
this is where you need people around you to like guide you in the process. Because like sometimes it sounds counterintuitive to what you
Hmm.
think things work, but in no regard or offense, it's because the person's not educated enough on that subject. Yes, pulling carbs will lose weight. You're losing water weight. You pull carbs too early, you affect performance. And it's
Hmm.
artificial weight loss that if you pull carbs, let's say you pull carbs 2 weeks out for a show, right? When
Hmm.
we got a water cut, you've already lost the water. What
Yeah.
am I pulling? What you want me? I have to pull
Yeah.
another 5% off you
Yeah.
because your body does not want to lose any more water because you've been eating no
Hmm.
carbs. Well, I could pull like a 3 extra% off of you by having you eating carbs all the way up
Hmm.
until maybe a little bit of sweating, or like, or you could have cut calories for a couple weeks and got you a little bit leaner, and then while eating carbs the whole time, and your
Yeah.
performance gets better, so you can push harder in the gym, so you can lose more weight by gaining muscle and starting the snowball process. It's the amount of things I've seen, heard, seen done.
Cause,
It's, yeah,
and
it's
people need that out
big.
there.
It's a big reason why I want to be bringing this to the sport. Um,
Yeah.
I was talking to Rena Lovelace, and like she's like, "There's so many bad cuts over there in Europe," and it's just like I hear about them. I've had European clients, and I've had them make weight in the smoothest way possible. Like Mark Cummins, one of the high level 90s over there, I've guided him before on cuts, and he's just like, "This is just like black magic compared to what I'm used
Yeah.
to." He's just sweating a bath for hours. He's like, "No, you got like, dude, you got to do like one bath because you're like half a kilo over, whatever."
Hmm.
He's like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's gonna work. It's gonna happen," and then it happens. It's just athletes got
Yeah.
to the process, but they need the right people to give them the process.
That's true, because I just had to pull up this comment from someone on our last episode. Os Metaler is the comment, and he was like, "I 100% need to listen to this stuff right now because he's a U80 athlete 2 weeks out from his major comp, and he spent the last 3 weeks in comp of prep doing 100 to 110% of comp weight for 3 weeks. Like, so that's 5 weeks out, just starting to hit comp weight 4 times a week. I was like, for 2 hour sessions, I was like, that's going to be
Mhm.
brutal. And then you imagine how many people are doing things like this, where then 2 weeks out, you're also just suddenly going to cut out carbs or whatever. And then you're just like, your last week is miserable. And you, for most people, I would say like it's always interesting to me when people are surprised their performance was bad when like according to their Instagram stories they're miserable for the 9 days leading up to the show. You're like
Yeah, I
your
mean,
body tends to respond to what it's in.
Andrew and
State.
Bruce are both making weight this week, this Friday.
Mhm.
We're not pulling their carbs until Wednesday, so they're getting a day and a half of low carb
Yeah.
total. Like that's legitimately, they get 1 day and a half, but they're like, "Well, I'm not exactly happy, but I need to
Mhm.
pull the water." It's just like, what do you think is going to happen? It's just, it makes you feel better in the short term, like, oh, I'm losing weight, but it's not what's actually going on in your body.
Yeah. And that's the main thing is like I think that's why it's key of having a professional to like tell you all these variables and kind of like let you know because you don't know what you don't know. And most of these people are just kind of like feeling it out and feel like they kind of know their body or whatever, but you don't always like know the ins and outs of things. And you realize that for most people, a day and a half or 48 hours of no carbs is way better than what most people have been doing
Oh, I
for their
mean,
preps of just like just
yeah.
doing wild water cuts because you can't just rely on no carbs 2 weeks out, water loading at the beginning of the week, and then an absurd amount of sweat sticks
Also, if
leading
you're
up to it.
cutting
You're
carbs
like,
foods out, what is the water bonding to?
yeah,
Like, what, like, you need glycogen to put it in the muscle. You're just
yeah,
not gonna have any bonding to it. So literally, what are you loading? You're not loading anything. You're
yeah,
just,
because
your gut
that's
is, your stomach is, but it's not going anywhere. There's nothing to bond. And so it's like you still should be having moderate to high carbs even the start of the water load. You want it. Uh,
but and that's the good thing of like I'm trying to get into these things. So just giving people a sense of like what the benefit of all these things are. Because I think it can be very easy in the age of supplements and everything else to just kind of like overlook this one part. Or it's kind of like I feel like sometimes it happens with strength coaching, but even more so I think with nutritional coaching is that's where people feel like they need to somehow save money
yeah.
and everything. And it's like you're not thinking about saving money when you're spending money on BCAAs and whatever pre workouts and all these like things. And it's like that also just like those things, like not having the full picture, you realize that for a lot of these people, it's amazing, especially of like, because I mostly hang out and train a lot of times with people who aren't high level athletes and stuff. And how many people do these things of like in their mind, somehow like carbs have been demonized to the point where they don't do very many carbs at all. And then you're relying on just pure pre workout and 600 milligrams of caffeine to get you through all your workouts. You're like, that's not healthy for your body, and that's not going to be like that's going to wreck your sleep of like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't understand my friends who will do that kind of level of caffeine at 5 or 6 in the evening after not eating carbs all day. I'm like, your sleep's going to be weird. Like,
It's
it's
it's just
insane.
it makes the short term look good. It's artificial weight
Mhm.
manipulation. Like they
And
just
but yeah, people
it,
like it though.
I mean, well, people like it because the number on the scale
Mhm.
changes. It's not, but it's
Yeah.
not changing. You're not gaining muscle at the proper rate. You're not
Mhm.
recovering. You're not. It's it's not. It's just a bad part of the process. It's not something that is sustainable. We're learning that
Mhm.
now, and it's not something that's going to promote the greatest performance. Like
Yeah.
you'll get more eating the carbs and getting a better workout than skipping the carbs and not getting better. You still have to train hard when you have those
Mhm.
carbs, but now
Yeah.
you have the ability to on that. And
Mhm.
yeah, maybe you blowed up and have a little extra water retention because you ate a little, you did a late night workout, and you woke up the next day. There's still glycogen in your system, and the water bonded to it. Cool. But then
Mhm.
a week happens and you gained an extra bit of muscle and now your metabolism's faster. And then another week happens and you're lighter or the same weight, but your body fat's lower. And then another week happens, and you keep that process. Okay, now you're even leaner. Versus like I lost 3 pounds this week,
Yeah.
and you're there. And the second you eat your carbs again, you're up 5.
Mhm.
It's
Which is which is how it seems to be for a lot of people
well, that's
because
what
it is.
happens. If you cut carbs and eat carbs, your body just sucks the water up like a sponge, and your weight goes up.
Yeah. And that's the main thing is like why people need all that. Because I think at the end of the day, one of the things that I appreciate about you and like part of our whole goal with this show was how can we make things more sustainable? And like we do offer a lot of critiques on things, but it's because we want them to do better. Because I guarantee you, if I don't care about something, I am not wasting any feedback or time on it.
Yeah,
Like there have been plenty of people. It's like if I see you doing something wrong at the gym and you've never been very nice to me and I don't have any like investment in what you're doing, I'm not going to take my time to like, hey, here's what you could change. Here's how you could improve this. It's like people critique what they care about because you want it to be better. If like one of our first conversations we had a while back, feels like it's over a year ago now. Like just talking about how you were like, this is my life. Like strongman is my life and I want it to be better and stuff. And I think that's the key to all of this. Is like I know I like you're good at checking me sometimes when I could be a bit too critical when I'm just like, you know what, everything sucks. And stuff. You're like, no, it doesn't suck because if it sucked, we wouldn't be here and stuff. Like clearly there's something to offer. So I think the main thing was for one, we somehow had a long episode because if Dan's not here to keep track of time, there's literally no one keeping track of
that's
time.
not here to slow you down.
I know. As I always joke to everyone, I'm like, he never competes as a Masters, but he does have the bedtime of a Masters athlete. Like, because that's the main thing. I'm like, you're an hour behind me, and he's like, yeah, I get too tired by 8. I need to go to bed. And I'm like, that's crazy. But it's what can you do? So I'm so glad you came on the show. Like
Yeah,
this was
like,
really
thanks for having
great
me. Thanks for
and
letting
stuff.
me talk about everything I enjoy and my next goal and my next career hopefully goal is bringing better nutrition to the sport. So thanks for allowing me to hopefully launch that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'll include for everyone listening in the audience here. It's harder sometimes to hit links down in Spotify, but I'll include a link to the website. It won't be active until you're saying Saturday or
Yeah,
Sunday.
it's gonna be active this weekend. So
Okay,
Saturday,
this weekend,
Sunday. So I'll make a
Saturday,
post
Sunday.
about it and then we'll have that going. So I'm really
Yeah.
super
So we'll
excited.
do a little collab post. That'll be good to like announce that.
Yeah.
Be like, here it is,
Perfect. Yep.
gsknutrition.com. And the 20% off thing,
Yeah.
like you said, it is limited spots and everything. So it's not like we need
Yeah, no,
everyone and
yeah.
everything. Like,
I don't want to over commit. I want to give the same quality, and I've pretty
mhm.
much done the math. It's about 30 slots total I have available.
Yeah.
To, because of I have time right now, and I want to make this as big as I possibly can, and that's with me giving direct dedication to the athlete, where no one has to pull back, and I have to be like, I'm not focused on that person. Everyone gets the same amount of like proper attention, multiple check-ins, things like that. So that's kind of why I'm kind of keeping it to that limited number
Mhm.
currently. And I have 2 people that I've already inquired, so it might go down to 28 even by the end of the week. So it's
Yeah.
just something I need to keep available and keep aware of, just because I have a streamlined process. I'm very good at it.
Mhm.
I have been working on this for a long time with athletes, and I'm bringing it to a business. Is all I'm doing versus what I was doing just to help certain athletes that reached out to me. That's why I'm able to take on a pretty decent workload, but it's a streamlined, controlled process. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah. And I think that is like super important. Like I think because also that limit is good because it's always amazing to me when people talk about like having online clients and like though you throw out numbers like 50 or 60 and I'm like that's if you're doing this full time that's less than an hour you can dedicate to anyone in a week
Yeah.
and stuff without like either burning yourself out like
Yeah.
crazy which isn't good for either person or
Yeah.
the athletes not getting the attention they deserve. So I think
Yep.
that's a
And
good thing to
that's
note.
something I never want to do, is to feel like someone is not getting what they're paying for and not getting the results they're looking for. Again, within reason, as long as they're doing their part as well.
Yeah, awesome. Do you have any final closing words? Any zippy things?
No, nothing, nothing too much. I think I threw my zips as we were talking for a little while now. But if you need to find me, my Instagram handle is Giant Slayer Krause. That's where the GSK comes from on the website for that. So it's gonna be fun with that. Any questions, reach out to me too. If you want to inquire or just ask me something, that you can also just like DM me. I'm pretty approachable, I think. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he is always willing to answer questions and everything. Very, very responsive. So thank you so much for coming on. This was wonderful.
cool. Thank you, John.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and follow us on Instagram for updates. We'll catch you next time on World's Strongest Opinions.